to show the relationship of the encroachment to the parcel boundary. But now the Act also requires you to put the nature and extent. So you need to say it's an awning, a brick wall, whatever, and how far it goes over. You need to give offsets at both ends of it, or wherever, if it's on an angle, you need to give offsets where the angles are. And you need to state what the actual structure is. But that, I think most people have already been doing that. The third change, it's to do with stratum, part stratas and subdivision of stratum lots in DPs, where your strata plan only subdivides part of the building. So your location plan is required to show the perimeter of the side of the building of which the proposed stratum parcel forms part. What did that mean? What have you got to show? It's the perimeter of the side of the building being the lots on which the building is situated. So here's an example. Up in Port Macquarie, you've got this apartment building. There's 3 stratum lots in it, lots 1 to 3 in that DP. Here's a cross-sectional view. Lot 2 is subdivided by a strata. Lots 1 and 3 are just remaining as standard stratum DP lots, and the strata plan's only over lot 2. So the location plan for that must show the perimeter of the whole of the parcel of land, which contains both lots 1, 2 and 3. So that you've got to show, as one of your location plans, the entire site which the building sits on. And that includes any encroachment from any part of the building, not just the bit that's associated with lot 2 in the strata plan. You'll also need to do individual location plans for each part of the stratum DP that you're subdividing with your strata plan. So the first one is the side of the building, full stop, and then individual location plans for each part. So at every level that this lot 2 in the DP's on, you've got to have a location plan showing all the bits and pieces of lot 2. And then you go in and do your floor plans as well. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the top strata plan requisitions for 2012. It doesn't seem to update. I've been doing this thing for 12 years. I think it's pretty much a similar sort of thing. They just swap places and add a new one now and then. This next lot is a little bit shock and awe, I'm afraid. It's from our report that we got from our management system only this week. I didn't realise what this would come out as. It tells you how many strata plans were lodged and their category, whether it was a strata plan of subdivision, strata plan of consolidation, building alteration plan, part strata. It tells you how many were lodged, how many were requisitioned over the last 12 months from the 1st of January to the 31st of December last year. 87% of plans were requisitioned for stratas. 100% of part stratas, 100% of building alteration plans. There was only one, which, fair enough. Strata plans of consolidation, 83%. Standard strata plans, 86%. It's not very good. It's pretty awful. And I know you're going to say, oh, we get all wishy-washy requisitions that sort of mean nothing, a lot of them. Well, all I can say to that is, if you get a requisition, the next plan you do, you should address that item, even if you think it's silly, because the requisitions are building up. You know, we want to see that go down. I think a couple of years ago we got it down to about 50%, and we're pretty proud of that. I know a lot of them are simple, small things, but yeah, it's something that we've got to work on. But anyway, here's the top 5. Line boundaries, that's on your floor plan, how you define open space lots. Connections on the location plan, well, with the new regulation, that should be made much simpler. Stratum statements, bylaws, and approved forms on admin sheets. Line boundaries, it's pretty basic. The line boundaries for your strata lot must be shown by an unbroken thin line and must have a dimension unbracketed. As you can see, the boundary of the courtyard there, it goes up 101.81 across 19.65, down, cross up to the building. That's your boundary, that's the first bit. So you need the distance and the line of all the boundaries. Now you've got to define every angle or bend in that boundary. So the first point, the bottom of 1.81, if this thing moves over here, that's defined by an offset along the wall of the building. I'm assuming that, well, down the other end of this is part of the plan. There's a right angle offset. Even this doesn't have to be right angles because it might be along a line that's already fixed. Then you've got to fix this corner. You've got to come out from the building. Oh, this is changing the slides. you've got to come out from the building, 6.72, turn a right angle, go up 1.66. You've got to do that for every angle. You can't use two swinging intersecting arcs like that red circle down the bottom there. That's not an intersecting where the arcs swing. Both ends of that line, 2.48, are fixed independently by offsets right angle from the building. If they weren't, you'd have to fix that point by another set of offsets. So that's line boundaries. You can use a right angle symbol like that little box, or you can put all connections 90 degrees unless otherwise shown. You can have consistent line thickness. All boundaries defined by structures are shown by a consistent thickness of line work, and all line boundaries are defined by consistent thin line work. The thickness of the line for a structure doesn't represent the thickness of the wall. It just says the face of that wall is a boundary. If the wall's 2 metres thick, you still show it by that same thick line. You don't have to go inside and put steps and angles and bumps in it. It just says the boundary of the courtyard follows that wall wherever it is. You don't need to step around things. The next one is connections and location plan. The purpose is to prove that the building or lots don't encroach over the parcel boundary. If the building or lots are within 2 metres of the parcel boundary, you've got to show connections. If you're on the parcel boundary, you don't have to if it's a line boundary, as we showed before. The method is, for courtyards, you show offsets corresponding to the offsets you used on the floor plan to fix your courtyards. So if you come along a line of a courtyard, to fix a courtyard, you've got to continue that line out to the parcel boundary and give it distance. So we know they're along the same line. So here's some examples. This is a Strata Plan with no courtyards. You basically just draw a box because it's over 2 metres away. If the building box is within 2 metres or on the boundary, you've got to give connections square off the building to say that it doesn't encroach. So you've got 3 connections which are prolongations of the wall and 1 that's actually on the boundary. So you do it from the corners. This is a Strata Plan with courtyards on the parcel boundary. That's that sample I showed you before. You don't need to have any connections on your location plan at all because they're actually on the parcel boundary. You've got to have that notation. This is a Strata Plan with courtyards off the boundary. You can see on the floor plan the courtyards don't go right out to the boundary at the top. The ones down the bottom do. So there's a note there saying lot boundary is coincident, so you don't need any offsets for the bottom part of the courtyards on that floor location plan. But at the top, because the courtyards are not on the parcel boundary, you've got to give offsets along the parcel boundary line out to the parcel boundary if it's within 2 metres. If it's over 2 metres, you don't need to show it. For stratum statements, you require a stratum statement for every part of a strata lot that's not covered or has a structural base. You must relate the stratum statement to a permanent structural feature, that is the upper or lower surface of a structural feature that's shown on the plan, probably a floor. You identify the floor level that you use if the building's multi-storey. So if you've got a 3-storey townhouse or 2-storey townhouse and you're giving a stratum statement for the courtyard abutting it, you've got to say that the stratum statement relates to the ground floor level of the unit or the porch or whatever. You can only have a maximum depth and height of 50 metres without prior approval. And I can't emphasise strongly enough, don't use generic statements. You must customise your stratum statement for each plan, because traditionally you see things come in, it's the same statement on every plan, but the building themselves are actually different. There's cover on some, there's podiums under others, there's eaves, there's sloping courtyards. All things have to be considered. So you create a generic statement, it doesn't work. You've got to make a customised one for each one. So this is what you've got to be aware of. Any eaves or other cover over the outdoor area. Any car-based bases, you've got to look at what's going on there. Courtyards on podiums above basements and sloping courtyards. So here's the instance of an eave. If you have a stratum statement saying the courtyard extends to 3 metres above the upper surface of the concrete base, except where covered, that's your traditional thing, that's fine, works well. What if it's a 3-storey unit and the cover is 3 storeys up? The effect of that statement means that the courtyard of lot 1 goes up to the underside of the eave of lots 5, 3 storeys up. That's not how it should happen. You should say, stratum statement of courtyard extends to 3 metres above the upper surface of the concrete base, except where covered, and amplify it to say within this limit. So it doesn't continue up to the cover, it goes up to cover or stops at 3 metres, full stop. For car-based bases, I don't know how many we've seen where they gave in this situation a depth limitation for the car space. So the car space of lot 3 was given 2.5 metres into the ground, which effectively meant that that concrete driveway was partially owned by the common property and partially owned by the lot owner. You should always, if you have a hard stand base, limit your depth to the upper surface of the hard stand base. That does away with any problems. If you're on a podium and you have a stratum statement, like, you beware, because your stratum statement here goes up 3 metres and down 3 metres into the ground, except where you're covered in this limit. That looks perfect. But what if there's a basement underneath which has a common property or another lot sitting down under it? You've got to break your stratum statement up. You've got to say the height's limited to 3 metres above the upper surface except where you're covered within this limit, and the depth is limited to 3 metres except where there's a basement roof below, in which case the upper surface of the basement is the boundary. So you've got to look at each thing. Here's an example of one where the courtyard went down 5 metres into the ground for lot 2 and 3 and 1, yet underneath is common property, lot 3, lot 2, all down obviously well within 5 metres. So you've got conflicting title boundaries. So think about your stratum statements and customise it to suit the situation. The same with sloping courtyards. This may be a bit hard to comprehend, but the courtyard of lot 2 is limited to 1 metre below the upper surface of the floor of lot 2. The upper surface of the floor of lot 2 is that dotted line. 1 metre below goes to that yellow line. I'm standing down there in the courtyard, completely out of the cubic space of the lot. So the lot owner actually owns nothing but airspace a metre above the ground. So you've got to actually think about how the yard slopes away and give a correct stratum depth limit. The next most common requisition is getting the bylaws wrong. I've done this a million times. So you've got 2 options. You can adopt model bylaws, one of the 6 in the regulation. You all know them. And if you adopt residential, retirement village or mixed use, you've got to pick the animal option. If you don't pick an option, you get given option A without it by default, which may not be what people want. But if you don't put something there, you'll get a requisition if you put the wrong one, or you don't cross off the bottom. If you don't cross off the second option, you get a requisition. If you don't do anything right, you'll get a requisition. So they're the simple things you need to fix up to stop this 86%. The second option is to do a schedule of bylaws, in which case you lodge that approved form with the plan, and how many sheets are in that approved form, you just put the number there. It's approved form 27, you put down it's intended to adopt whatever bylaws you want. You can take residential model bylaws and say together with additional bylaws, and maybe you want to throw the memorandum in there. That's the place where you should put it, and then the scheme will run efficiently. So that's how you create bylaws. The fifth most common requisition now, this is a new one, is people are doing approved forms, Strata Plan approved forms for subdivisions, consolidations, etc., and putting the required certificates on a piece of paper with the file. They don't come in like that. They have to come in on an administration sheet, on one of the annexure sheets for your, I think it's form 6B or something like that. And if you've got multiple forms, which you usually have consent to the initial period, consent to the unit entitlement, and then your owner's corporation has got to put their seal and affix and certify it. Put them all on one together and put the certification, which is the approved form 23, the attestation, at the bottom. If you put one on one sheet, one on another sheet, one on another sheet, you need to do 3 attestations, one on each sheet, which is really a bit ridiculous, but put them all together, you only need one. Another issue is, say with this certificate, there's options. You have to delete inapplicable clauses. This is the certification that the initial period's expired. It says there's 2 options. The initial period expired before the date the council issued the approval, or at the above date the original proprietor owned all the lots. Either situation satisfies the requirement, but you can't have both. So you've got to cross off which one is applicable for your plan. So you'll get a requisition if you don't cross off inapplicable sections of the certificates. All right, well, it took a while, but we got to some of the questions, and I'll be able to get through some of these. It comes from a surveyor. I've got to read his question. I get a lot of things from draftsmen who draw plans for different surveyors. this is what he sent me. He said, I just want to confirm the best way to proceed in this particular case. Please note the